Thinning is one of the primary tools we use in forest management. Thinning allows us to make selections between different trees that we want to favor to grow. In this video, we'll discuss the methods, the tools, and the timing for thinning to improve the growth, health, and quality of our forest stands. The process of thinning allows us to make selections between different trees in a forest stand that we would like to see grow versus others that are either crowding the ones that we desire or that we would like to see removed. Thinning provides us an opportunity to also provide additional sunlight to the forest floor to allow for additional regeneration and diversity of forest plants. In thinning, we make selections that are going to hopefully over time provide a more vigorous and healthy forest stand by favoring the growth of the remaining trees. Nature through time will also thin forest stands, but in many cases, most of the trees start slowing down in growth due to competition. And so by making these thinning selections, we can actually enhance growth, vigor, and health in forest areas. In order to make good thinning management decisions in our forests, we need to first think about our management objectives. We can manage our forest areas for many different objectives or goals. Wildlife habitat, timber production, recreation, biological diversity are all examples of objectives for which we can manage our forests and will inform which trees we decide to thin and which trees we decide to keep. So it's important to get a good idea of what your management objectives are before you start this thinning process. There are a variety of considerations about when to think about thinning in your forest. Forest trees, as they grow up, oftentimes start in very dense stands where there's not enough light and space to grow trees to large size. But oftentimes we have other objectives we want to accomplish by allowing forests to grow and trees to compete. One example is the competition between trees actually produces straight stems and small side branches which enhance timber quality. Also, sometimes very dense stands are very favorable for wildlife habitat. Thinning provides a wide variety of positive benefits to our forest environments. So by doing thinning, we actually shorten the period of time under which trees are under stress due to competition between each other by killing undesirable trees that are competing with our desirable trees. We may also be able to select the different species in our stand by favoring the growth of some species that maybe don't grow as fast as others by providing more crown space and light. We can also enhance the growth and development of trees that are beneficial to the wildlife species we enjoy on our properties. And so these decisions are important ones to think about as we consider our objectives and the timing and methods and tools we use for our thinning. There are a variety of ways we can go about thinning and a variety of tools we can use. In most cases, we're deadening trees to favor the growth of surrounding trees that we want to keep in our forest environment. This deadening process provides additional growing space, light, and in many cases also water and nutrients in the soils as well, as we deaden trees that compete with our desirable trees. There's a variety of pieces of equipment we can utilize to thin our forest stands. In general, we're cutting or felling trees or girdling trees to kill them to provide additional growing space. One of the most efficient tools is the chainsaw. However, before you decide to use a chainsaw, you need to make sure you have the proper personal protective equipment, called PPE, to protect you as you use this tool. You also need to make sure you understand how to safely use the chainsaw. If you've not had experience with chainsaw use, you should get some training beforehand to make sure you can properly and safely use this piece of equipment. We can also use hatchets, saws, axes, and a variety of other cutting tools to also cut down and/or girdle trees that we desire to thin. And in many cases, we're also using herbicides as we do this cutting or girdling to kill the root system and prevent resprouting of the trees we want to kill. There are a variety of different approaches we can take to thinning depending on the There are a variety of different approaches we can take depending on the characteristics of the woodland we're working in. Thinning can be done by selecting individual trees that we wish to favor. This is often called crop tree release. In this situation, we find trees that are meeting our management objectives and we want to maintain their growth through time. In order to do that, we will look at the crown of the tree and essentially divide it into 4 quadrants, like 4 pieces of a pie. We look at each quadrant of the tree and see if there are other trees that are competing with that crown area, preventing it from having expanded growing space. If there are, we will thin to release 3 to 4 sides of that tree to grow freely for the next 10 to 15 years. This is called crop tree release. In many cases, we're killing or girdling trees and leaving them in the stand because they're not large enough to sell. But if we're working in more mature stands of trees, oftentimes we have the option of selling trees as a form of thinning. And so we can actually select trees that are competing against the trees we'd like to grow for a longer period of time. And if they're large enough or there are markets for those trees, we have the opportunity to have a timber sale. You can refer to additional videos in this series for information on selling timber. We've talked about the option of girdling or dropping or felling trees in our forest thinning. And there are some advantages to both approaches. In many cases, when we have a tree that might present a risk to either property or people using the area, it's often the best idea to put that tree on the ground by felling it. This allows us to predictably put the tree where we want it and doesn't present a continuing risk of a standing dead tree that might fall at any time and damage either people or property. However, we also have the option of girdling trees. This is where we cut a ring around the trees to deaden them and allow them to stand dead and slowly decay in place. This actually provides several benefits. Girdle trees have a tendency to stand for a few years and slowly decay, losing larger limbs and ultimately softening up such that when they do fall, they don't do a lot of damage to standing timber in the area. They also provide significant wildlife habitat benefits as standing deadwood. And then even